hello to everybody who's watching this interview. Let's welcome Joergen Rasmussen. He's coming over in June to Belgium, to the Hypnosis Center, to do his training, his new training. But before, Joergen, we start talking about the training, maybe it's a good idea to introduce yourself and tell some things about you. And I think one of the interesting things is, how did you get in touch with hypnosis? When did you start working with hypnosis, and why did you start working with hypnosis? So maybe that's a good begin for this interview.
Yeah, I started exploring this way back as a teenager. I've always been very driven by curiosity. So a lot of people who teach have these dramatic rags to riches stories of crying in the bathtub or being seriously depressed or something like that, and I have nothing like that. I had a good childhood. I was just driven by curiosity, and I started meditating at age 13. I was competing in various martial arts tournaments, so I was into sports psychology, doing experiments to see how I could improve my performance. And I was teaching martial arts and self-defense. And of course, when you try to teach practical self-defense, you're in many ways attempting to teach people physical solutions to very emotional situations. So I got more and more interested in psychology, functional psychology. And then in my late teens, I heard about NLP and that you could cure a phobia in 15 minutes, and I got curious again, and I had to find out if this was true. So I started attending seminars, and I discovered that it was in fact true. And I got the fever, so to speak. I bit the bug, and I started studying Milton Erickson's work, and I was so deeply fascinated by it, and heard that Bandler and Grinder had this so-called impossibles practice back in the day, where they would look for clients who had not succeeded in traditional forms of therapy. And I wondered if I could do that. Like, that seemed to be the coolest thing in the world to do. So I started doing it. I started putting ads in paper. This was after becoming an NLP trainer and having some hypnosis training, but I started putting ads in paper looking for these sorts of clients, and offered a no change, no pay policy, which is a great way to go broke. But it's also a great way to learn, and it became my passion and my job. And although I stopped doing the impossible practice, I did that for like 8 years. This is my 21st year into it, seeing clients, and I still love it. And that's basically it.
Okay, so you don't only have clients that are coming to your place. You do a lot of Skype sessions as well.
Yeah,
you have international clients from all over the world.
Yeah. I've released a couple of books. One is titled Provocative Hypnosis, and one is titled Provocative Suggestions. And as a result of those books, I think to a large degree, which have sold all over the world, I started getting international clients. And of course, some of them fly here and do live work with me, and the vast majority of them I see by Skype. So I would say in a regular month, maybe 30%, something like that, are international clients seen on Skype.
Okay, great. So you also you already mentioned your books. How is this new training that you're going to do here in Belgium is different with the approach that you describe in your books?
It's much simpler. My old books are full of cases of working with kind of extreme clients, and some of the most extreme things that I've done, including hiring actors and bringing anorectics to restaurants, and setting up these various contexts for change. And what I discovered when I did my old provocative hypnosis seminars, which was based upon that first book, was that I really enjoyed doing them. I think the participants mostly enjoyed the seminars, but it was somewhat hard to translate it, meaning most people just are not going to do the types of stunts that I describe in my books.
Yeah, I can imagine because the one thing with where you put a knife on somebody's throat, I think when we do that kind of therapy in Belgium, it's
Yeah,
gonna be a little bit tricky, of course. So, yeah.
it's gonna be very tricky anywhere, and I've been very, very lucky not to end up in trouble. And I think these days I'd be much more likely to end up in trouble because we're more and more. This is just my perception, but we're more and more moving towards a very bureaucratized society with more and more rules and regulations for everything. So yeah, I noticed that it was somewhat hard to transfer some of the stuff. I think some of it is probably my kind of quirky personality or tendencies. Regarding this seminar that we're doing now, John Grinder once said something that really struck with, resonated with me. And he was my mentor for like 5 or 6 years. And he once said that the difference between a professional athlete and an amateur athlete, minus the money, is that the pro does less. The pro only moves when he has to and only tenses when he has to. And that made a lot of sense to me as a martial artist. And it became apparent to me that skill is not about increasing complexity or adding stuff. It's much more about subtracting stuff, like cutting away the fat, eliminating all the stuff that doesn't really have to be there. And my process over all these years has been one of elimination, of looking at all the stuff I've been doing and asking, what's the bare minimum that I can actually do? What steps here may be redundant, may not actually need to be here. And the psychological illusion model seminar is based upon one very simple idea, and it is that we humans have a tendency to be lost in thought. We have a tendency to think without quite noticing that we're thinking, and that gives rise to a lot of psychological illusions and misunderstandings, which lead to unnecessary suffering. And I've discovered by having people look at their experience in a new way can help people see through many of these illusions. And this is by far the easiest framework that I have used. I do quite a bit of mentoring, so I see that this is very transferable. Meaning, when I teach this to people in Australia or Europe or United States, the average person gets this and is able to implement this. And you don't have to impose a wacky belief system on someone either. It's just about having people discover that what they think is going on in their internal experience isn't actually going on when they really know how to look at it. And that's a game changer.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, it's something that after the seminar, they can start using quite immediately in their practice. So it's a masterclass, so we will all have therapists in the room who already have a system that they are using, but they can add this directly to their toolbox and take it out whenever they want to use it. So they will get the system quite fast in this seminar.
Yeah, it's a bare minimum way of working, and it's from experience of mentoring people who have backgrounds both in NLP, psychology, hypnosis. I noticed that it's easy for people to implement, and also something else that's really exciting. It's easy for most people to self-apply. And this has been one challenge, I think, in like for me, I've worked with NLP for 2 decades and hypnosis, and of course you can self-apply it, but it's sometimes a bit difficult. I mean, yes, we can do self-hypnosis but it's often for many of us quite difficult to self-apply. So this has also been, for me at least, and most of the people I work with, consistently the easiest thing to self-apply. And that's a it's a great thing to be able to actually do with yourself the stuff that you actually do with your clients.
Yeah, it's always good to work a bit with yourself as well, because most of the therapists, they're only working with clients and they forget themselves. So that's because sometimes it's not that easy to work with yourself. But when you have like a system that you, and it's also good when you experience the thing that you are doing with your clients on yourself. So when your system is really good to work on yourself, I think that will be a great asset for lots of therapists as well, not only for their clients but also for themselves. So
Yeah, I think this is such an important point, because if you look at, I'll use a martial arts or even an athletics metaphor again. If you're training, let's say a kickboxer, for example, it's one thing to teach him the techniques, but you have to have the endurance, you have to have the speed, you have to have the power, you have to have the ability to be resilient and to take a shot. And there's all these attributes in addition to the techniques that you actually need to have for the techniques to kind of matter. Like if you don't have the endurance to go those rounds, it doesn't matter what you know of techniques, because you won't be able to
yeah,
last.
you can't
And,
complete a fight, of course.
yeah, yeah, and this is, I think, an appropriate analogy to the change arena. Is there's often so much emphasis on techniques, and frameworks, but there's often very little emphasis on, what are the attributes that you need to have as a human being to be able to connect with people in that way, to be able to create a context for change in that way, to like in athletes, there are capabilities and attributes that you need to develop. And a lot of times people forget that or don't emphasize that. So this is a way of having a way of internally being able to develop many of these attributes. I once heard a developmental psychologist say something that resonated with me, and he says that most people who work with people, in this capacity, are doing a second job that their clients aren't really paying them to do. And this second job might be, to attempt to manage the client's impressions of them, to kind of come across in a certain way, um, to not make mistakes. And of course, this second job, which is all about, one's own stuff or self-concept, if you will, takes up a lot of bandwidth.
Mm.
And makes us less relevant and less available for the actual client that we're working with. So
Losing energy on that second job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the concentration and the focus on the client is gone.
So
Or less.
yeah. So this is largely about being able to fire oneself from the second job, or at least radically reduce it, so that you can work with the client in a flow state of presence, so that you're no longer so much doing hypnosis, but you're being hypnotic, meaning if you are in a state of complete presence with the person that you're working with, and you're both responding to each other, that's more a matter, I think, of being hypnotic. You have a highly responsive relationship in real time, versus kind of doing hypnosis as an operator, so to speak.
It makes a lot of change for the mindset of the hypnotist. If you're doing hypnosis or you're being the hypnotist and be hypnotic, that's of course, and then you can concentrate on what's going on with your client and not on what yourself are doing. So that's, yeah. So tell me something about how the training will be structured. Is it a lot of theory, it's a lot of practice, or is it a combination of both? Are you going to do some demonstrations? So how do you structure your training?
I'm a strong advocate of learning by doing. So a lot of practice time, a lot of real-time experiments with a partner, thought experiments, demos, demonstrating it for various, issues and stuff like that, and people primarily learning by doing. So of course I will be speaking, somewhat,
Yeah, of
and
course.
telling stories and stuff like that, but but primarily the practical, hands-on thing, which I think, this is my bias, but I think that people mostly learn by doing stuff and applying stuff.
Yeah, of course. I have the same opinion. My trainings are also really hands-on, so that they really get what you're explaining, because only by hearing or seeing you do it, it's not enough. So hands-on is really good. So
Yeah.
we have people from all over Europe signing in for the training. It's so I'm really excited getting you over here. I remember Anthony Jacquin saying that your talk at the UK Hypnosis Convention was the best of the convention, but it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, so I missed it. Yeah. It was the day after the gala. So, but I believe Anthony Jacquin, and a lot of people here already trained with Anthony and Freddie here last year. So they know that when he is recommending somebody, they're gonna be in for a treat. So I think we will have a great weekend here in June. So maybe you can tell something why a hypnotherapist should sign up for this training.
Okay.
Even when it's only one thing to get out of it. So, but what is the positive, the thing that could change their way of working or their way of practicing hypnosis?
I'll do my best to come at that from a few different angles. And Anthony, by the way, I appreciate, and he's a straight shooter. So he tells it like he sees it. I think one reason why my talk at the UK Hypnosis convention resonated was I did some live demos on stage. I did, I think, about three or four. I was lucky, you can get people who are really rough to work with, but these were good candidates. I was just lucky also in picking them, but they were very good demos, and I actually got feedback from a couple of people who had done with live clients what I did on stage just a couple of days later, and gotten similar results. So I think one thing that many people really liked about it was the simplicity of it. Of, oh my God, can you make it that simple and so straightforward? So I think one benefit for hypnotherapists is that what we're going to do here is extremely simple in a good way. Meaning, most hypnotherapists, in my experience, do way too much. They are doing a lot of stuff that they actually don't need to be doing, in addition to doing that second job internally, that makes their work more difficult than need be. So this is the result of over 2 decades kind of cutting away the fat and getting down to these like first principles of change. So I would say it's likely going to simplify your work quite a bit. It's not a panacea. You'll still have people who won't respond to this, and in that case, you have other stuff to do. But it very likely will simplify your work, and it will simplify your work without adding any BS. Meaning, one challenge that I have had with a lot of hypnotic work over the years is that, let's say you do regression work, and you get them into somnambulism, and you find this root cause event, and then you have to forgive someone, and you may have to set up ideomotor signals with the unconscious, so to speak. Well, on one level, the meta suggestion is that all these things have to happen for change to happen. You have to enter a special state. You have to find this first event, or you have to set up these signals with this magical entity. And I've been increasingly bothered by that throughout the years, in that we hypnotherapists have a tendency to impose a lot of these things onto our clients that don't really need to be there. So that's another very, very big strength. Also, this is very applicable to many different issues. So, for example, when I see clients, I do this with fears, depressions, anxieties, anger issues, compulsions, addictions, and also psychosomatic issues such as allergies and tinnitus. And so it's a very simple way of working that has a very broad um, a very broad application, so to speak. And finally, I'll add a final point. I don't know how relevant this will be, but these days, quite a few people are taking a somewhat contemplative approach as well. They may have looked into, frameworks such as the three principles or various schools of meditation, or be kind of searching in a spiritual realm, not talking about the supernatural realm, but a spiritual realm. And they're often learning it from people who don't have any clinical experience and who have no experience in applying that type of stuff with actual clients. So for people who are moving in that direction somewhat, this is a chance to merge it with a very practical framework of how can you actually use it in a live session with an actual client who may not be interested in those things, who may just want to be able to fly comfortably or get rid of an addiction.
Yeah. Okay, I hear a lot of reasons why to sign up for this training. Yeah, I hope a lot of people will sign up. There are already a lot of people signed up. So we'll have a full training room here with what is good, so people can practice with a lot of different people. It's also a very good way of learning that you're not always practicing with the same person. So a big group is better for a hands-on training, of course. Maybe a final question for you. I have this YouTube channel. It's called Tips for the Mind, where I explain how people can work with their own mind, how they can change themselves with their own mind. Maybe you can give a tip for people how they can do positive change just by using their imagination, visualization, their mind. Maybe you can give a tip for my viewers.
Okay. Well, I'll give this tip, and that is that if you are anxious around another human being, and no one's having a gun towards your head, there's not a physical threat. It's more a perceived psychological threat. Then you're demanding something either of yourself or of the other person, meaning you're demanding, I need to know that this person likes me or approves of me, or I need to know that I'm going to perform or come across in a particular way. So whenever we do anxiety, we have a tendency to demand something either of ourselves in terms of performance, or in terms of how other people view us, that they must not view us a particular way, or that they must view us a particular way. So a very simple tip that has been very useful for a lot of people is, if you begin to feel the anxiety, just stop and just ask yourself two questions. And the first one is, what am I demanding right now? And the second question is, must it be that way? And when you ask the question, ask it with a open-minded, curious quest for truth, meaning a bit as if you had a fishing rod and you're standing at a new fishing place and you're throwing it out there to just see kind of what bites, what's there. Don't use the questions to argue with yourselves. Just ask them. Just ask, what am I demanding right now? Okay, so I'm demanding, for example, that I must perform, or that my daughter must listen to me, or that I need to know that people won't reject me, for example. Okay, that's the demand. Okay, do I really need it, or must it be that way? And if you can ask that question, just the act of asking it gets the brain to reconsider it. And every time the brain reconsiders it and looks at it with fresh eyes, it has a tendency to see that it's a thought, or at least weaken it. So this is one very practical tip that has been useful for many of my clients.
Okay, thank you very much for the tip. So Joergen, we will see each other in June. You will be very welcome here in Aarschot in Belgium, and I'm quite sure that everybody's going to enjoy your training. Thank you for the interview.
I'm really looking forward to coming there and to sharing this. This is my passion. So